Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Faith Evolved, and this is your host, Jay, your spiritual INTJ? Not anymore. I'll get into that in my next video, but before I rebrand this whole channel, I'm going to get right into today's topic, and that is, what if I told you you might just be in the Matrix? Stay tuned.
What if I told you you are really in the Matrix?
So before I get into today's topic, I want to make sure that I give you a disclaimer that right now you're in a good mental headspace. That, the things I'm going to be talking about in this video could precipitate an existential crisis. And I'm not kidding. I've had some times in my life where these kind of thoughts have really got me spiraling into depression or into anxiety or, just wondering about what is the whole purpose of life and, does anything I do matter and all those type of things. The good news is I have a solution, and I have a different perspective on the difference between the red pill and the blue pill as opposed to what's portrayed in The Matrix. Now, I just watched The Matrix Resurrections. Pretty good movie. I'm not going to give any spoilers, but that's one of the things that, kind of inspired me to do this video today. While it's fresh in everyone's mind, the movie just came out. The whole topic of, are we living in a simulation? Is this the Matrix? Could this actually be our reality? Or unreality, if you want to put it that way, this manufactured reality, this is something that's coming up more and more and more. And a lot of spiritual practices seem to indicate that this, 3D world that we live in and these bodies, these, flesh suits that we live in this material world and this universe isn't fundamentally real, that who we really are is spiritual at the core. So now I remember when I was younger, like probably in my either, early teens or mid-teens, I watched a movie called The Truman Show with Jim Carrey. And that movie actually messed with my head because I was wondering back then, like really just starting to grapple with reality and wondering if, my life was a big joke. I felt that, I had a lot of, kids that would make fun of me and bully me and pick on me at school. And I didn't have the best home life. I always felt like I was alone. I felt like, there was like things that would happen that seemed to, not be in my favor, and almost like it was like manufactured or, it was like rehearsed in a certain way that was, meant to purposely hurt me. And so there was a long period of time when I was in my teens that I would look for evidence that I was in some kind of Truman Show. This is before The Matrix even came out. And I would, ask my family, ask my dad. Like I would literally think that I was being, watched, or that my life was some kind of sick joke show for the enjoyment of others. And that the bad things that would happen to me were, fodder for an audience to laugh at. Oh, this Jay, look at his car broke down again. Or look at this, ha ha ha. This guy has no friends. Oh, look, another day that he tried to talk to a girl and got friend zoned, or whatever the case may be. Now that I look back, it's kind of sad and funny at the same time. But it wasn't, it was before The Matrix that I was starting to question my reality. And if, this is kind of a, benevolent universe, or if you will. So by the time The Matrix came out, I was already desensitized to the idea of, this could be a simulated reality. This could be a joke. My whole life could be a joke. So at that point, it was, I got to enjoy the movie without, giving it, any kind of real thought or, it precipitating an existential crisis. So it wasn't until really much later in my life, probably a few years ago actually, when I really started, questioning there's got to be something more. I'm missing something, Why is it I keep trying all these things to improve my life and they either backfire or don't help? And yet the bad things keep on happening and they affect me so much. Why don't the good things affect me as much as the bad things? Why does it seem like the bad always wins and the and the good always, just kind of, putters out, really doesn't do much? And it's more of an emotional thing for me because, yeah, sure, on paper, a lot of good things have happened to me. But unfortunately, I haven't always interpreted it as being good because it didn't make me feel good or didn't, I felt like somebody else was doing it. Like I was living vicariously through other people's faith in church, frustrated that things never got better for me spiritually and emotionally and mentally. Or I was letting other people make decisions for me. I was kind of going along for the ride, just saying yes to other people's feelings and desires without even questioning what mine were. So anyways, of course, like I said, a few years ago was when it really started hitting me, that life felt meaningless, especially when I was going through the dark night of the soul. And if you want to watch my video and hear about my experience of going through the dark night of the soul, you can always go back to the main page of my channel, and it's right on the top. An INTJ's Journey Through the Dark Night of the Soul. So what do I think the Matrix is? Well, first of all, if you're into spirituality and you've read about near-death experiences and pre-birth experiences, and you've read A Course in Miracles, for example, maybe even the Urantia book, and a few other spiritual texts that are out there, many in the spiritual community, there's pretty much a consensus that we've come here voluntarily, that we've, voluntarily taken the blue pill, if you want to put it that way, and, put ourselves into this simulation. And if you were to ask people why, well, they would say it's part of God's expansion, or for us to get that contrast between perfection and imperfection, and fear and love, so that can help us grow and help the universe grow and God expand and all that stuff. It sounds all well and good, but does it really change anything? Like in the here and now, in this material 3D world that we live in these flesh suits that we can look around and we can see the material world, and we see all the pain and suffering and strife and, just the disease and death. Like, does that knowledge really help us here and now? I mean, for me, it does, but not in and of itself. There is this idea in the Matrix of the red pill and the blue pill. And it's not what you might think it is. See, in the Matrix, there was two pills, the blue and the red pill. And the blue pill was to keep you in the Matrix, keep you asleep, in this simulation, not questioning reality, just going on with your life, going through the motions. Whereas, again, the red pill was to wake you up and bring you to the real world. But I will give you a tiny little spoiler, actually, from The Matrix Resurrections, which might be apparent to many people that are on a spiritual journey already. The red pill and the blue pill are both an illusion. That's right, they're both illusions. Think about it. If you're trying to wake up from a material world, from this 3D reality, what difference would it make whether you're given a red or a blue pill? They're both material. They're both part of the Matrix. How could either of them truly wake you up to reality? No, it would have to be something outside of the Matrix that would have to somehow, transcend you out of the Matrix for you to truly wake up. Now, is there something outside of us? Well, yes and no. So if you believe in the idea of God or Source, and this is probably the most, in my mind, the most beneficial idea that you could possibly have that would ever precipitate any real hope outside of being hopelessly trapped eternally inside of a matrix. And that is that God is all there is. And if you are God, would you want to be in pain? Would you want to be in fear? Would you want to be in hopelessness and despair? Or would you want love, joy, peace, and happiness? So if all of existence, all of reality is God, and this could either be a person or not a person. If all that is God, everything within inside of him is self-contained within him. And A Course in Miracles says that we're thoughts in the mind of God. So now the thoughts were able to personify, if you will, and make free will decisions, because, well, God has free will. He can make free will choices and create. So can we, just like him. So with that free will, we can decide whether or not we want to do God's will, which would eventually be our will if we're a part of him. And that means that we've decided, for whatever reason, to fall asleep. That's right, we put ourselves in the matrix. That is the only explanation. Because if all that is decided to split off part of itself on purpose to be malevolent, well, since God is self-contained, he would have to contend with parts of himself being unhappy, being in torment, being in despair and hopelessness. And he would never be able to escape that. So, but us being a part of the whole, given that free will, we're allowed to make the decision to go behind the veil, as some spiritual people call it. And there's a good reason for that. They say it's to help with God's expansion and help us to see that, contrast between fear and love, as I said before. So, and if we're in the matrix, we can't really die. We can only have the illusion of dying. We also have the illusion of a blue pill and a red pill. Well, I want to tell you the real reason of the blue and the red pill, like what it actually would be if those choices were real. And again, it is an illusion because in eternity, it's all knowledge. Like everything is known. There's no illusions. Like there's no difference, no opposites. There's no happiness and then sadness or fear and love. It's all love. So for us to even experience this, it's a temporary simulation so that we can experience it for whatever reason God has. We don't really know exactly every single reason, besides that, the concept of his expansion. But being in this simulation, is still this beyond this material world experience you can have that could point you towards a way out of the matrix. And it might not be a physical way out of the matrix, but if you think about it, what is it that you really want? Deep down inside, what you really want is peace and truth, and of course love. And that's the whole point of existence. If you really wanted to get to the brass tacks, really want to get down to brass tacks and really to the heart of the matter, we want to experience as much joy and pleasure as possible and avoid as much pain and suffering as possible. Ask anybody that. It's universal. So the blue pill is unconsciousness, ego, staying asleep. And that's a fear response. And so when you're living in fear, you feel bad. You're going to be sad, depressed, anxious, whatever the case may be, you're feeling bad. You're, on a low vibration. When you take the red pill, let's call it love. It happens to be red like a heart. Hey, coincidence? I don't think so, maybe. But you're feeling better about yourself when you're, loving, when you have peace and forgiveness and joy and happiness. You feel better. You're vibrating higher. So now there's a lot of theories about how you escape the body. Maybe it's through death, or some people think you can, get caught up in the rapture like the Christians say, or, get translated like the Urantia book says, or transcend or ascend, or whatever these cases may be. We don't really know while we're still in the body. But what we do know is happiness makes us feel better. Sadness makes us feel worse. Fear, makes us feel worse. Love makes us feel better. That's what we have to hold on to. And I think that is, as much of a solution as I can possibly give you here while I am not an ascended master, okay? Like, that's, to me, what makes the most sense. Like, for example, if someone, cuts you off in traffic, is your first response to, give them the middle finger or yell at them, or just let it go? Now, of course, your ego might want to attack, but when you attack somebody else, it doesn't make you feel any better about yourself. Maybe temporarily you get, ego gets puffed up, but in the end, if you really were to say let it go, you'll feel better about yourself. You're not giving into anger, you're giving into acceptance, which is a higher vibration. So like I alluded to before, the matrix is self-contained. No symbol of any sort can really save you or help you transcend necessarily out of the matrix, or at least to a higher level of the matrix. So whether it's a blue pill, a red pill, a pink pill, a yellow pill, or a rainbow-colored pill, it doesn't matter. They're all symbols. But I do believe symbols point to something greater. And so when Jesus was here, he alluded to the kingdom of God. And he alluded to the mansion worlds, or the mansions that are in heaven. So higher planes of existence as you ascend up. And he said the way to get there is to love God and love your neighbor as yourself. So like I said before, when you're feeling fear, which leads to anger, hatred, sadness, depression, anxiety, and all these other negative emotions, you're contracting your soul. You feel more separate. You feel more closed off from God or source. Whereas when you feel love and you forgive and you let things go and you bless and you allow happiness, peace, and joy into your life and spread it to other people, that's your ticket, to ascend, to vibrate out of the matrix, if you will. So I think that's the key. And another really cool concept this is kind of something I've thought of, not necessarily, in any spiritual book, but maybe a more, IT kind of allegory is, again, with a self-contained system, if you have a computer that's not on a network and the program's running, you boot that computer up, it boots up into RAM, all the decisions that you're making here in this matrix are all on that self-contained computer. And you can save your work to the hard drive. Let's say soul.exe is your file. And you're using a computer to program your soul, and you're sending instructions and receiving instructions, and of course it's held in RAM while that computer's on. But as soon as you shut that computer off, all the memory that's in RAM disappears. And the only thing left is whatever you saved in that file that you're working on, that soul.exe file. And that's what you can eventually put on a USB stick. Let's say the computer is your body and the computer is being thrown into a landfill because it's obsolete, worse than a paperweight. You take that USB stick with your soul.exe file and you put it into a more powerful computer, which will be a new body that you'll get in the Mansion Worlds, as discussed in the Urantia book. So everything that happened to you that, was just work being done on your soul, it was just scaffolding. Everything in that random access memory, while the computer was calculating and, handling the instructions that you were sending and receiving to it, that is basically as if it never happened. And you could pick and choose as the programmer being your spirit, say, you know what, all I want is the good. I don't want to have any of the negativity or fear or pain that I had to go through saved on this file. The only thing that you bring with you when you leave that body behind and it goes back to dust, you only bring back things of spiritual value. So things like love, joy, peace, happiness, truth, goodness, all that stuff is all that matters. So this is literally a sandbox that we're playing in right now. And the goal is to try to learn how to love, even this far away from source, this far away from, our eternal being that we actually are. So everything is being done here, and once you're done and your body is laid behind and your spirit, leaves, everything that you've amassed that's good, of spiritual value, is your soul. And that's what you take with you, leaving behind everything else as scaffolding. All the negative experiences and bad memories and pain, suffering, disease, that's all left behind. That's all scaffolding to help build your soul. And what happens is your soul merges with the one. Your soul merges with God, or the fragment of God, known as the thought adjuster in the Urantia book, and becomes one. And that spirit gets to take with them, everything that you've built up in the soul on planet Earth. So you get your cake and eat it too. The Matrix is not as bad as you think it is, folks. It's meant to work out love in the most extreme cases so that you see that disparity between how far away you are and how perfect you really are in eternity. And you can see that contrast and really feel the love, And that's a beautiful thing if you think about it, And again, like I said before, we could believe that the universe is benevolent or benevolent. But to believe it's benevolent makes no sense, because if we're all a part of God, God doesn't want to have, especially as being an eternal being, he would not want to have any part of his being marred by sin and pain and suffering and hatred and fear. So that's why we created this sandbox environment that once it's done, it'll be as if it never happened, except the good that we created out of it. Thanks and God bless.